Hello. I'm Shreya, a full time artist, art educator, Skillshare teacher, and a YouTuber from India. And this year, I'm part of Pigeon Letters design team. Alright, so let's get started. Grab all your materials and let's paint a beautiful snowy winter landscape with none other than watercolors. Let's first talk about the materials that we will need. So for this video, I'll be using 100% cotton, 300 GSM cold press watercolor paper. Then you will need a board to stick down your paper with masking tape on all four sides. Remember to take a loose board and which is not stuck to your table, as we will be tilting our board while doing the first layer of our painting. Next, let's talk about the colors that you will need. Here I'll be using only 6 to 7 colors. So the first one is shadow violet, neutral tint in the tone blue, forest green, burnt orange, red brown, and yellow ochre. I have already squeezed down all the colors on my palette yesterday and now they are completely dry. I don't like using paints freshly squeezed out from the tube as I end up using a lot. Alright, next you will need 2 jars of water, brushes, round brushes. Here I'll be using size 4, 6, and 14. These are wooden handle synthetic brushes from Pigeon Letters. Next, you will need a pencil, eraser, and a tissue. Alright, that's it for all the materials. Once you have collected all the materials that you will need for the class, start applying masking tape on all four sides of the paper. Once you have applied the masking tape, let's move on to the sketching part. Sketching is very simple. All you have to do is draw snowy mountains in the background, and once you have done that, we will draw tiny little cabins in the front. We will draw all the cabins in different direction to create the depth in our painting. Once the sketching is done, what you can do is pause the video and then do the sketch, or you can take a screenshot and use that as your reference. Remember to draw very light as we will be majorly painting with the light colors, especially the snow. The pencil mark would definitely show up, so try to make the sketch as light as possible. If not, use the eraser to rub it all over the painting before you move on to the painting part. Also, one more thing I forgot to mention here is I'll be using A5 size paper for our painting today. Here I'm drawing the last cabin and then I'll draw a few lines behind the cabin, which will be the pine trees, and we'll be doing everything with our brush later on. If you're finding painting these many cabins a bit difficult, you can always skip one or two cabins if you want. So that's all with the sketching part. Now let's move on to the painting part. And first, we will paint the first layer of our landscape. So here I'll be using a larger round brush size 14 and I will wet the whole of the paper, leaving the cabins aside. Remember to apply even layer of water on all of the paper. Then tilt your board by keeping a masking tape or some object below that. Next, I will take shadow violet, and I'll add a little bit of infrared blue as well as a bit of burnt orange to desaturate a little, and I'll add a lot of water to decrease the value of the color, and I'll start applying that color on the sky as well as on the snowy mountain. But remember to leave a lot of gaps in between. As the paper is wet, the colors will spread and you will get softer edges. In case you don't have these colors, you can use any purple you have. Instead of infrared blue, you can use indigo or Persian blue, and instead of burnt orange, you can always mix a little bit of orange to your burnt sienna to create the exact same color. Alright, so once I've applied the first layer of the shadow violet color, I'm switching to my smaller round brush and I will start applying the same color around the cabins, especially where the cabins are touching the snow, to create a bit of shadow of the cabins on the snow. Once the first layer is done, I will reapply the same paint, but this time I will add less water and make it a little bit more darker, and I will apply that same color near the snow and the lake area to create a bit of shadow of the snow on the water. Then while the color is still wet, I will take burnt orange and I will start adding very light value of that color onto the water to create a bit of shadow of the cabins on the water, which we will paint later. Alright, lastly I will add a bit of shadow using the same color around the cabins. If you find your colors are not blending together, clean out your brush completely, dab off all the excess water on the tissue and use the damp brush around the edges of wet color, and you will see that the colors will blend beautifully onto the paper. Remember to do all the steps while your paper is still wet. So you will have to be a little bit quick while you are doing the first layer. Once that is done, you don't have to worry because later we will be doing wet on dry where you do not have to hurry a lot. This is quite a crucial step to create the soft, misty look, which is very important while painting a winter landscape. That's the reason we are doing everything, especially the first layer wet on wet. Alright, so while the paper is still wet, let's hurry and paint few pine trees on the background mountains as well as around the cabins. So what I did is I mixed a little bit of infrared blue to my forest green color, and I added a bit of water to desaturate the color, and I am using the same color and the smaller brush to paint the pine trees around the cabins as well as in the background. The colors will blend a little with the paper, making it look blurry, and that is exactly what we want. Painting pine trees is very simple. First draw the straight line and then start adding tiny little strokes from the top, and as you move downwards increase the size of your strokes. I make your pine trees triangular, that is pointier on the top, and as you move downwards make them wider and thicker. Alright, so I will add few more trees and then we will let everything completely dry before we move on to painting the cabins and other parts of our landscapes. Okay, so before we let the paper completely dry, let's lastly add a little bit of more darker value of blue around the snow area where it is touching the water to create a bit of more shadow. As you see, we are painting wet on wet, the color spreads and it gets lighter. That's the reason we will have to apply 2 or 3 layers. All right, once that is done, let your painting completely dry. Once it is dry, let's move on to painting the cabins. So here I'll be using burnt orange, red, brown, Add a little bit of yellow ochre to paint all the bottom part of the cabins. The roof we will keep it white as it is covered with the snow. So I'll be using these three colors to paint the cabins, and I will just keep on changing the colors. If you don't have red brown color, you can use sepia, or you can add a little bit of Pines Gray to your burnt sienna to make it a little darker. You don't need exact these colors to paint this landscape. You can use the basic colors you have with you. For the forest green color, you can use a little bit of indigo or Persian blue to any of your green to make it little darker, and you will get a forest green color. Alright, so if you have your basic colors, it is very easy to get the color which you want. You don't need all these pre-mixed colors. So don't be disheartened that you don't have these colors and you won't be able to paint this landscape. No, never. You can always paint it by mixing your own colors. Also, if your color are slightly different from these, the end result would not differ. It will look exactly the same or a little bit different, and that wouldn't matter. All right, so do paint this one. The only thing which I put a lot of pressure on is using the white paper when you are working with watercolors, especially as we are doing the first layer wet on wet, and we are painting that first layer for at least 5 to 10 minutes. So that's the reason I would suggest you to use 100% cotton 300 GSM cold pressed paper so that your paper would stay wet for that period of time. Alright, now let's move on to painting the pine trees in the background. So what I did is here I mixed my infrared blue, forest green, a little bit of violet shadow to make it more darker, and once I've got the color which I want, I will start painting the pine trees around the cabins. Remember to use the smaller brush which has a really beautiful tip so that painting the pine trees would be a lot easier. I love using these brushes. Firstly, they are synthetic hair, which is very important, and lastly, although they are synthetic, they hold quite a lot of color, plus they have beautiful tip which makes painting different subjects of landscape way easy. You can check out all of these brushes. I will put the link in the description box, so do have a look at that. Here I'll add a lot of pine trees of different sizes and shapes to make it look natural. That is, I will make some trees taller, some shorter, some thicker, some wider, and in some I will leave a lot of gaps in which I'll be adding the trunk of the tree. That way, by changing the size, shape, and direction of the trees, you will make it look as natural as possible. So to remember that while you are painting the pine trees. Otherwise, the whole area would look monotonous, which you don't want. Once I've painted the pine trees, I will take a very light value of shadow violet and I'll start adding few dry brush strokes around the cabins. It's very simple. Load your brush with paint, tap off all the excess on the tissue, and then just rub your brush on the paper. Remember to tap off the excess on the tissue so that you don't end up getting a lot of paint on the paper, because you don't want to cover the whole area with the same color. We do want a little bit of white portion to make it look like snow. Alright, now I'm using the same colors to add ripples on the water. Next, let's add doors and windows of our cabins. So here I'll be using red brown color to add those onto our cabin. Like I said earlier, if you don't have this color, you can always mix a little bit of Pines Grey to your burnt sienna to make your brown a little darker, and if you want, you can add a little bit of red to make it more reddish. Then I'm taking a light part of burnt orange and I'm adding few more strokes to our cabins. Don't you think the painting is already looking so damn beautiful? You have got the winter vibes, plus you got the misty mountains and the trees in the background. It is looking fantastic, and I'm hoping you all are enjoying and you will paint this sooner or later. Alright, all you have to do is add few more tiny details to bring the whole of your painting together. Alright, so let's not skip the steps because this will add the wow factor to your painting. Alright, so let's do that. So what I did is I just added wooden barns near around the cabins as well as in the background mountain, and then once that is done, I'm using very light value of the same shadow violet color and adding few more grasses in the foreground snow part. Remember to use very light value of that color. Once that is done, let's add few dry trees in the background using the darker brown color. And I'll add few more in the foreground around the lake as well. Now here I'll add few more darker strokes of the forest green color here and there on our pine trees to create a bit of dimension, and then I will use the light value of shadow violet to create the dry leaves on our dry tree. I'll do that just for the background tree and leave the front dry branches as it is. Let's also add a little bit of darker shadow around the lake area. So here I'm taking the same shadow violet color and adding few strokes here and there around the snow area. Once that is done, you can keep your paper flat. Actually, you can do that once the first layer of our painting is done. I completely forgot to keep my paper flat in the flow of, painting. But you can do this step earlier as well. That's why I always tell my students and everyone to watch the whole video in one go. Maybe you can watch it at a certain speed, and then when you sit for the painting, you can watch it at a normal speed, because I end up changing so much, and sometimes I do make mistakes, and I do tell my mistake so that you don't end up doing the same ones which I have done. So yeah, I always tell to, watch the whole video with full concentration, watch my strokes, watch how am I moving my brush, watch how I am mixing my colors, everything, so that you get the base idea of what you have to do. And once you rewatch and when you paint, you don't have to, you know, watch it with so much concentration. Alright. So yeah, while I was talking about that, I just took my white jet pen and added highlights around the doors and the windows of the house. Then I'm using very light value of shadow violet and adding few strokes on the roof area, because it's looking quite flat, which you don't want. So yeah, adding those strokes, and we are almost done with the painting. I'll just add few more grasses with the same shadow violet color, and then we will let the painting completely dry before we peel off the masking tape. And here's the finished look of our beautiful snowy winter landscape. It's looking gorgeous. Believe me, you will have to paint it to know how easy it is, and the end result is so beautiful. Alright, now let your painting completely dry, then peel off your tape at an angle which is away from the paper so that you don't end up tearing it. And this is our final work. I hope you enjoyed painting along with me, and I'm excited to see your work. So do tag me as well as Pigeon Letter whenever you post. Alright, I'll see you guys really soon. Bye.